I woke before I was ready to, the way you do when the alarm has already gone off once, and you've decided, against all evidence, to ignore it. The room was still half dark. My mouth was dry, my head was thick, and the only clear instruction it could manage was the simplest one there is. Water first, before anything else. So I went out to the living room without my glasses, feeling along the edge of the furniture the way you do in your own home in the dark, half trusting it to stay where you left it, and reached for a cup. That was when I saw it. A thin black line on the wall, up near the corner where the wall meets the ceiling. It was moving. Not the way a shadow moves when a car passes outside, slow and whole. This moved in pieces, a steady shifting along its own length, as if something were being carried from one end to the other and back again. A little black line, busy with itself, running along my wall at 6 in the morning. My first thought wasn't really a thought. It was my hand, already turning toward the kitchen, toward a wet cloth, toward the simplest solution there is: wipe it off, whatever it is, and go back to being asleep. The line looked like a conveyor belt in some factory, the kind that never stops, the kind nobody is standing around to watch. I stood there holding an empty cup, not awake enough to be properly alarmed, and not asleep enough to let it go, and watched it move for longer than made any sense. I went back for my glasses. This is the small, unglamorous truth of most of my mornings. Nothing is clear until I've found my glasses. I put them on, and the line resolved itself the way a word resolves when you stop squinting at it. Ants. Hundreds of them, maybe more, walking nose to tail in a column so narrow and so even that from across the room it had looked like a single drawn line. I should say that I still had the cloth in mind. But there's something about seeing a thing clearly that changes what you want to do with it. Up close, the column wasn't chaos. It was organized. Two-way traffic even, a lane heading one direction, a lane coming back, brushing past each other, pausing, touching feelers for half a second, as if checking something, then moving on. Nobody was in charge of it, and yet nobody was out of step. It seemed almost rude to wipe out something that orderly before I understood where it was going. So I followed it instead. I walked the line with my eyes first, then with my feet, holding the empty cup the whole time as though I still meant to use it. It ran down the living room wall, turned a neat right angle at the skirting board, crossed toward the kitchen, kept low along the base of the kitchen wall, and bent down hard into the corner by the floor. Wherever it was going, it knew the way better than I knew my own apartment at that hour. The line ended at the bin. Or rather, it ended just short of the bin, which turned out to be the whole point. There, on the floor, half a step from where it should have been, was a lollipop. Not a whole one, a used one, the candy worn down to a thin amber sliver on its little white stick, the wrapper nowhere in sight. It had been dropped or tossed somewhere in the general direction of the bin, and it had missed. A near miss. The kind of throw that says the thrower fully intended to score and fully believed the matter was settled the moment the thing left their hand. The ants had no such doubts. They had claimed it completely, a small, dark crowd working over the sticky amber, while the orderly line up the wall was simply everyone else queuing for a turn. I knew exactly whose throw it was. There is only one person in this apartment whose aim runs on optimism rather than evidence. And it isn't me. My child has a habit of finishing sweet things in secret, usually after lights out, and disposing of the evidence afterward with great confidence and very little accuracy. I stood over the lollipop and the ants pouring toward it, and felt the specific low comedy of being a parent at 6 in the morning, Somebody in this house had a wonderful private evening, and somebody else was going to clean it up. I'll admit I said something out loud, to nobody in particular, about how that aim could use some practice. It was the kind of thing you say just to put a sound in a quiet room. Then I crouched down to look properly, because the ants had found the thing long before I had, and they clearly knew something about my own kitchen that I'd only just woken up to. A lollipop that didn't make it into the bin, sugar left out overnight, and before I had decided to think about anything at all, my mother was in the room. Not really, of course, but her voice was the way a voice can arrive fully formed when the right thing sets it off. She had a whole catalogue of warnings about sugar, and they came back to me in order, in her exact phrasing, complete with the slightly tired tone of someone who has said it 100 times. Don't eat too much sugar. It's bad for your teeth. You'll be sorry when you're older. If you don't finish a sweet, wrap it back up in its paper and put it properly in the bin. Don't just leave it lying around for things to find. Rinse your mouth before bed. And then the one that was never really about teeth at all. She would lower her voice a little for it, the way you do for the good part of a story. Ants love sugar, she used to say. If you eat too much sugar, the ants will come in the night and carry you away. I don't know where she got it. It made no sense, and I believed it completely. For years I carried a quiet, specific fear of being lifted out of my own bed by a column of ants on account of something I'd eaten. I used to check the floor beside the bed before I climbed in, just to be sure. And the strange thing is that the fear did its job. I was careful. I wrapped my sweets. I aimed for the bin. Standing there in the half-dark with the actual ants in front of me, doing the actual thing she'd always warned about, I felt something small and unannounced move through me. Oh, Mum, I thought, I miss you a little right now. That was all of it. Not a wave, not a flood, just that, about the size of a single breath. And then it was gone again, the way these things go when you're not quite awake. I stayed crouched there long enough to get curious, which is dangerous, because curiosity at 6 in the morning is how you end up late for everything else. Here is what I more or less worked out, watching them. The ants weren't crowding the lollipop because they have a sweet tooth exactly. For an ant out looking for food, sugar is fuel, fast, simple energy, the quickest thing there is to turn straight back into more walking. A worker ant runs hot and runs constantly, and a melted sweet on the floor is, to a creature like that, a small power station. But they hadn't smelled it from somewhere outside, through the wall. That isn't really how it works. An ant's sense of the world is short, close to the ground, almost underfoot. What more likely happened is that one ant, just one, wandering and checking, the way one of them always is, slipped in through some gap I'll never find, rounded a corner, and walked straight into a fortune. And then it did the thing that turns a single lucky ant into a line on your wall. On its way home, it left a trail. Not one you could see. A thin track of scent laid down along the exact route it had taken, a set of directions written in smell. This way, it was worth it. The next ant found that trail and followed it, and on its own way back, walking the same path, it laid its own scent down over the first. Then another did, and another. Every ant that made the trip made the trail a little stronger, a little louder, until what began as one creature's accident had become a road, a clear, reinforced, two-way road the whole colony could read. That was the conveyor belt I'd seen from across the room. Not a machine at all. A message, walked into the wall by thousands of small feet. There's a name for the scent they lay down, by the way. It's called a pheromone, but the ants had been running the whole system long before anyone thought to give it one. I didn't hear the bedroom door. I just felt the warmth of someone small arriving at my elbow, the particular gravity of a child who has woken up, gone looking for a parent, and found one crouched on the kitchen floor, staring at the wall. "What are you doing?" they wanted to know. And then they saw the line, and the line was instantly the most interesting thing that had ever happened in the history of the world. They got down next to me on the floor, close, the way children do, with no sense yet that a face can be too near another face. A finger came out, aimed at the column, wanting to touch it. I caught the hand on the way down, gently, and we agreed without words to just look. So we looked at the ants together for a while without saying anything, which is its own kind of talking. Then I started talking anyway. I pointed at the lollipop and explained that all of this, the whole black river of them, was here because somebody hadn't put their sweet in the bin. I heard myself say that sugar wasn't good for their teeth. I heard myself say that when you don't finish something sweet, you wrap it back up and you throw it away properly. You don't just leave it lying on the floor. And then, because it was right there, and because some part of me couldn't help it, I heard myself say the rest. You'd better be careful, or one of these nights the ants are going to come and carry you off. The child looked up at me with enormous, delighted horror and asked, in a whisper, whether it was really true. And I went quiet, because I had just heard my mother, not remembered her, heard her. The words had come out of my own mouth in almost exactly her order, in almost exactly her tired and fond tone, the warning and the joke folded into the same breath. And for a second, I genuinely couldn't tell which one of us had said them. I had spent years not understanding why she told me that thing about the ants. And now, on the kitchen floor, having just said it myself to someone who believed it, I understood it perfectly. I just couldn't have explained it to you if you'd asked. We stayed crouched there, the two of us, knees almost touching, looking at the line on the wall. The ants kept at their work, completely indifferent to the two enormous faces hanging above them, carrying their small fortune back along the road they'd written for themselves. And I was looking at that, but I was also somehow looking at something else in the same patch of air. There was a line on the wall, running from the lollipop to wherever the ants lived, and there was another line in the room that you couldn't see at all. It ran from my mother, through me, to the child breathing beside me. The same sentence, the same odd little warning about sugar and ants, handed all the way down it, said to me once, when I was the small one on the floor, said now, by me, in my own kitchen, to someone who took it as completely as I once did. I hadn't noticed I was standing on that line until I heard my own voice traveling along it. You don't, usually. At least I hadn't. You think you're just talking. You think you're only telling a child to throw their sweets away. And then one ordinary morning the words leave your mouth in your own kitchen, and you understand that they came from somewhere. That they had been moving toward this room for a long time, through people who aren't here anymore, and that you'd been carrying them the whole way without ever once feeling the weight. My knees were starting to complain. The cup of water I'd come out for was still sitting empty on the counter. The morning was going to happen whether or not I understood a single thing about it. But neither of us moved yet. Neither of us said anything more about the lollipop, or the bin, or teeth. The child wanted to know where the ants were going, and honestly, so did I. We followed the line as far as we could with our eyes, across the kitchen, down into the corner under the window, to the place where the wall meets the floor, and the light doesn't quite reach. Maybe there was a gap down there, small enough that I'd lived here for years without ever seeing it. A gap that ran all the way outside. Maybe it only went off into the walls of the building somewhere. I leaned in and couldn't tell. The ants knew. They went down into the dark of the corner one after another, certain of the road, the same road they'd been deepening since before I woke up. And the two of us stayed where we were, on the cold kitchen floor, not cleaning anything up just yet, watching the line move.